So now we're on Daf Lamed Amud Beis. Mosiv Rabbi Ovin. According to Shmuel, you need a shchita mefueres, and if it's not mefueres, then it's possible. So Rabbi Ovin quotes a brisa, and this brisa rejects Shmuel. Why? Because shachet is haveshet lemata is hakona lemala. So obviously we're talking about two people who are shechting. One is shechting from lemata, and he's busy with the veshet, and the other is shechting milamala on top of the animal's neck, and he's shechting the kona. Or it's a veshet lemala, it's a kona, or the other way around, doesn't matter. Shitasuk shera. I don't get it. According to Shmuel, how could the shchita be kshera? Holeka shchita mefoeres. So mefueres means that it has to be that you have to shech the simonim in one place, as we said on Omid Aleph. The incision of the sakin should be wide open and recognizable as a shechita in one place. But now the Bryce is referring to one cut above and the other cut below. And the Gemara says, "Umosiv lo, u'mefarik lo." Rabbi Oven offers an answer and rejects his own question. V'shchita asuya bekulmus. Okay, what is shchita asuya kekulmus? Now, kulmus, as you know, is what a sofer uses to write Kisvei HaKodesh. But what does it have to do with this? So I got stuck on this. I'll read to you what he says here in the footnote. He says the shochet did not cut through the simonim on two separate horizontal planes. Rather, with one continuous stroke, he cut in a diagonally upward or downward direction. So that at every point he concluded the severing of one of the simonim and he began to sever the other simon. His single slanted stroke is aptly described in terms of above and below. I mean, I understand he slanted the knife, but the best I can do here, Rabosai, again, I think I don't know if you're familiar with the phrase in Yiddish, felt in Asbari. I don't think he does a clear job here, but I think what he's saying is that if, let's say, you have the two simonim like this, he shechted on a diagonal, but he really shechted straight line through the two simonim on this diagonal, going up and down. Why does the Brisa use the term up and down? Because when he shechs on a diagonal and he hits the second simon, that's considered relatively down. Not not horizontally, but vertically. In any event, the bottom line is that Rabbi Oven's reinterpretation of the Brisa is that it's a shchita mefueres in one place. Okay, now we're going to teach the law. Hahu Tura, right? There was an ox. The Ishchat b'shnayim u'shloshim makom. So it was shechted in 2 or 3 places. All Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta and shakal mishufrei to shufrei. Well, basically, he ate the meat of this ox. Amalei Reb Zera, I don't get it. Limad Tanu Rabbeinu, you taught us, Rabbi Yitzchak, that Mishnah Seni b'shnei sakinim u'b'shnei b'nei adam. Right, that there were 2 people shechting separately. Again, this is really complicated because we showed him here have different interpretations, but the simplest interpretation, I think, is that of Rashi. And Rashi is saying that limadatanu, meaning we watch you and you eat from this meat, you have thereby taught us that when the Mishnah says 2 people are holding a knife, it's not one person and another person who are both shechting simultaneously with one knife, but rather it's 2 people shechting each one respectively with his own knife. And nevertheless, you're eating from this meat. So your liberal interpretation of the Mishnah is Mekil against Shmuel. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Rav. So again, it seems like this whole issue about 2 people shechting simultaneously with 2 different knives remains like an outstanding controversy. Hechlid es a sakin bein siman l'siman, right? We said that chalada means that he like hides the sakin. And now he did it between one siman and another. Upsako. Right, so after he sort of, hid the sakin between the 2 simanim, then he shechted the second siman, is psul. I mean, l'chora, that's obvious. We know that there's a psul of chalada. We've seen it over and over again. That's exactly what the Gemara is now going to object. Michael Mashmal, why is Rav teaching me this? Tanina. Oh, just one second. I skipped a little bit. Tachas ha'or kshera. In other words, he went with his knife underneath the animal's hide or skin, and then he shechted the 2 simon. So the Gemara asked, Nino, we already learned to that Mishnah. Oh, shehechlid es a sakin tachas hasheni upsako. Even though he shechted the first simon, but now he hid the knife underneath the second simon, and then he cut it from back to front. Is Rabbi Shev of Omer Nevela? This is not a good shchita because it's got a psul of chalada. And Rabbi Kiva Omer Treifa. Now, it seems to me that Rabbi Akiva is saying treifa because the act of halada took place after he checked the first simon, before he checked the second simon. So the shchita already by definition is a shchita psula, and therefore the animal became a treifa. It dies without shchita. But it's not an avela because he's going to now complete the shchita with a second simon. But the only effect and impact of the second of shechting the second simon is to be mitar b'dei avela. So now we see that both Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yeshevav agree that when he hides the knife between the first simon and the second simon, then the shechita is psula. The only question is whether it's a treifa now or it dies as an avela. So what is Rav adding here? Yimi masnisin, if I only had the Mishnah, which is coming up around the bend on Lamed Beis. Hava, I mean, I would have said Hani mili mila mala mila mata lemala. When do we say that there's a psul of chalada? That's only when he puts the knife underneath the simanim, and then he cuts in an upward motion, and the knife is covered. Aval milamala lemata. I would have said the ka'avid b'derech shchita ema shaper dami kamash malah. Right, the normal way of shchita is milamala lemata, which is exactly what he did with the first simon. So maybe the only psul of chalad is only when he did it the opposite way, from lemata lemala. Now Rav says that tachas ha'or kshera. That was the sefer of Rav. So again, even though he hid the knife underneath the animal's skin, and then he shechted two simanim, it's not called chalada. Bei Rav Amri tachas ha'or eini yodeh. I doubt it, meaning I vacillate back and forth about whether or not this is a kosher shchita. Is it called chalada or is it not? To the fact that he hides it under the or and then shechts the two simanim, is that kosher or not? And the Gemara says that they asked in the Academy of Rav, the Amri tachas or eini yodea. So tachas matlis mahu. What if, let's say, there was a cloth that was tied around the animal's neck? That's not part of the animal's body. And now if he hides the knife underneath this cloth, why should that be chalada? Tachas semer mesubah, or underneath some sort of matted wool. Teku. So why is this called chalada? Just because it's covered by a piece of cloth? He says here, since the cloth was expertly, securely affixed to the animal's neck, it can qualify as a proper covering for the knife. So in other words, just like we had a suffix about chalada under the animal's skin, we're going to also have a suffix of chalada under this cloth that was expertly secured around the animal's neck. Boy Rav Papa, hichlid b'miut simanim mahu, meaning after he shechted already most of the two simanim, then when he got to the end of the shechita, he hid the knife, and then he shechted the last miut. Is it called chalada teku? I mean, this sounds very similar to the Machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Levi about whether or not yesh l'tchila yesh l'shchita mitchila v'ad sof. I don't know. Because somehow, even though he shechted rov shnayim, and therefore the shchita is a shchita kshera, but when he continues the shchita, which he didn't have to do, right? Kolomosiv gorea, we say in Hebrew, so he added something, and that now becomes integrated into the shchita, and it's pasul midin chalad. Let's just see if he. Do we regard the entire severing as one unified act of shchita? Okay. I wonder if anyone is going to ask my question. Does it have to do with Rabbi Yochanan and Levi? I don't know. Okay, then. So we still have a few minutes if you have, and we can at least try to finish today's daf. Hashochet, the Mishnah says, Shnei Roshim ki echad. Shchitaso kshera. So he's got two animals standing side by side, and with one flowing act of shchita, he shechs both of them. Is kshera. Shnayim ochsen v'sakim v'shochatin is also shchitasa kshera. Two people holding the knife. Afilu echad l'mala v'echad l'mata. Right, because we had a hava meaning that maybe if it's echad l'mala and echad l'mata, each one is somech on the other one, thinking that he already shechted rov of the simon, of the simonim, and therefore, in fact, he didn't do so, and therefore the animal's treif, komash mula, no, we're not choshish. Hitis es rosh of vas achas, right, he took the knife and he simply decapitated the animal, psula, right? We need holacha and hava. And this is doris, this is drisa, drasa. Hoyshochet v'hitis es harosh b'vas achas. So he did a holacha and hava. So he was cutting, but then he cut off the head. Im yesh basakim melot savar. So there's the width of the neck of the animal, and what's the size of the slaughtering knife? If it measures the width of the neck, then kshera. And why is this so? The shchita is kshera because a knife that long can sever the simona with a single sawing stroke. So we don't have to assume that he pressed down in order to take off the head. Hoyshochet v'hitis shnei roshim vas achas. So I guess there are two animals standing one next to the other, and with one stroke he beheaded both animals. In yesh b'sakim lo tzavar echad, even though his knife only measures the width of one neck, not of two necks, nevertheless kshera. But b'medvar mamurim bisman shaholech v'lo hevi, o hevi v'lo holech, avalim holech v'hevi, afilu kolshu afilu be'izmul kshera. So we said that if the knife measures less than the width of the neck, then the shchita is psula. Because we don't think that he could successfully, chop off the head by going back and forth. It's too small of a knife. We have to assume he pushed down the knife. However, the Mishnah says that that small knife is possible for these two heads, these two animals. That's only, says the Mishnah, he qualifies it if he did only one of the two, either forward, heavy, or, I'm sorry, holich, or heavy, or on the reverse. But if holich vehevi, if he did a perfectly, molich umevi, forward and reverse stroke, then it doesn't matter how short the blade is. Even if he shechted it with an ismil as a scalpel, something like they use for bris milah, is ksher. Minani mili. How do we know that there's a psul of drasa? And I thought the answer was halach l'moshe Sinai, but Omer Shmuel Amikrai has a pasuk for it. Chet shachut l'shonam mirmav diber, as we saw earlier. Now, what is the comparison to a chetz? Just like an arrow is propelled by the drawing of the bowstring, so an animal must be slaughtered with a drawing motion. Tonas Beri Shmuel, they have a different pasuk. V'shachat, ein v'shachat ela umashach. V'shachat, shchit is accomplished by cutting the throat. Umashach. I guess mashach is the hava, maybe. V'cheinu omer zav shachut. The omer chetz shachut l'shon mirma diber. This he calls the sawing motion of the knife. Why do I need the second pasuk? V'chi tema, if you only had the first pasuk of zav shachut, gold that is beaten or drawn out. So you draw the knife across the animal's neck, not pressing it down or chopping it. Chi temo, I could slug you up and say, what is zav shachut shenitva kechut hu? Shachut is actually gold that's spun like a thread. I guess they make it into very thin. Tashma chet shachut l'shonam. Rav Abibodik le gira l'Rabbi Yonah bar Tachlifa. He was examining an arrow for Rabbi Yonah. V'shachat ba'ofa b'hadi deparach. As the chetz, what's it called? The arrow was propelled. It shechted a bird. And if you're comparing shchita to an arrow, this is a real comparison. So Gemara says, why did he do this? V'dilma avid chalada. Shouldn't he be afraid that maybe the arrow entered through the neck of the bird and it was hidden underneath the two pipes? And when it says chazinon, we see gidfei dimifarmi. The feathers around the bird's throat were sliced, indicating that the arrow had penetrated at the front of the neck and so never burnt, but never were hidden. And the Gemara asks for her boy kisui. Right? We said that ophos required kisui adam. Where are you going to find the dam? I mean, you just shot an arrow at the bird. Maybe they looked for the blood and they found the blood and they covered it over. So Kisi Adam means you have to put earth below the dam and earth on top of the dam. Right? The dam is sandwiched between two layers of earth. Shenavik Yisov Ofer. Ofer lo never ela be'ofer. L'haim sheshochet tzok she'itein ofer lemata v'ofer lemala. Now, in Rabbi Yonah's case, the spilled blood of the flying bird fell upon the hard ground below. And the requirement of Kisei Adam means there's got to be loose earth that's placed below the dam. And here the bird fell upon hard ground. And the more answers, and with this we'll complete. The Mazmin Leili offered the Kule Pascha. Wow. They filled up the entire valley with soft earth. They knew exactly where the bird was flying and where it would land after it got shot down by the arrow, and they prepared beforehand the offer. Okay, Rabbosai, that's where we'll stop for today. And again, I wish you a great Shabbos, Parshas Va'aloscha. Maybe you'll get a chance to listen to my Dvar Torah. Anyway, thank you so much, and especially I was able to participate together with my family at the Kotel for the Anachas Tefillin of my grandson. Bar mitzvah will be in 2 weeks down the line. So have a great Shabbos.